Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for joining. At CIQ, we're focused on powering the next generation of software infrastructure, leveraging the capabilities of cloud, hyperscale, and HPC. From research to the enterprise, our customers rely on us for the ultimate Rocky Linux, Werewolf, and Aptainer support escalation. We provide deep development capabilities and solutions, all delivered in the collaborative spirit of open source.
Hey, you guys, welcome. Thanks so much for being here. I can't believe, Zane Hamilton, this is our last webinar of the year.
Last webinar of 2024. It's gone fast. Way too fast.
So fast. Okay, so we've got some amazing guests here with us today. So you guys already know who I am, Rose Stein. I work at CIQ, do sales and admin and all kinds of wonderful things. Glad to be here. Zane, why don't you introduce yourself?
Zane Hamilton, I lead sales here at CIQ.
You sure do. And you are a great boss, by the way. Thank you for being such a great boss this whole year.
You don't mean it, but I appreciate it anyway.
Just say thank you, man.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Or no, you're welcome. There you go. I said thank you. You say you're welcome. There you go.
You're welcome.
Easy breathing.
Whichever way.
All right. Wonderful. Glad to be here. And Mr. JW.
Hey, folks. I'm JW. I'm the head of CIQ's cloud programs over here. Pleasure to be on the show with you today, Rose and Zane.
Welcome, JW.
And also, I'm just in the gratitude mood. 'Tis the season. JW, thank you for taking on that role. You have had a few roles here at CIQ, and you've done really well at all of them. So thank you for everything that you do for us.
My pleasure. Let's keep it up in 2025.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe it's 2025 already.
It's so weird. It's so weird. All right. And Mr. Dean, you are a new face to me. So introduce yourself. Who are you?
Well, first of all, Rose, thank you for having me on the show today. My name is Dean Breida. I'm part of AWS's partner strategy. I do go-to-market strategy for application modernization with our partners.
Yes.
Welcome, Dean.
Yeah. Welcome, Dean. It's awesome. I know that we have a great relationship. I'm not really in that space there, but it's really nice to put a face to all the wonderful things I've been hearing about our relationship and our partnership with AWS. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, last but not least, Mr. Curtis.
Hi, and thanks for letting us be a part of the last webinar of the year. Like, that's actually a great honor, and like we really appreciate it. And for those listening, my name is Curtis Reese, and I work with Dean. I've had the honor of working with Dean for the last couple of years now, and my focus is on modernization partners, and I'm a principal SA focused on that. Been with AWS for about a decade now, I think going on 9 years this year. And so I'm very happy to be a part of this. Containers and Linux operating systems have kind of been, lockstep in my career here, and very excited to see what we can do with you and your customers together into 2025.
Yeah. Yes. And speaking of customers, I mean, we both have lots of customers and some of them are the same. Mm-hmm. So thank you to everyone who watches, everyone that is in all of the communities that we are a part of. And just thank you for being here and making this life a fun one.
Absolutely.
That's what we're here for.
That's what we're here for. Okay, so who's going to do the overview? A little overview of the Amazon EKS hybrid nodes.
So I can get started on that, and then Dean and I can just basically tag team the conversation as we go through. So we definitely want this to be an interactive conversation. So all of you can just kind of chime in as we go. And let me go ahead and share my screen so that we can get this started.
Yeah, and while that's pulling up there, I'll tee the stage up a little bit. This is a super cool launch we've been working on for the last few months, and this actually just got launched at reInvent 2024, which is always a fantastic party there. That was just occurring last week, first week of December. If you haven't been, that is a fantastic event to check out. It is by far the largest one of these tech conferences I've ever been to. And I got to say, probably had the most vibrant expo as well. It was just, everyone was packed in there, learning, having a great time. I got to meet our friends from AWS over during that show as well. And, it's not just a little window on the screen there.
JW, I feel like you told me when we were there, I think they were anticipating about 65 to 67,000, and there were over 80,000.
Oh my gosh.
Whew.
That's a lot of people in one place.
It's a lot of people. And it wasn't just one place, though. It was like, 5 hotels and all the conference facilities around it. It seemed like going from one place to the other was at least a mile and a half walk each direction.
Hopefully you wear
Huge.
good shoes, right?
Yeah.
Good time to
think
buy
I-
a new pair of sneakers.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
I think-
definitely time.
It's like
When you
oh,
think-
I've got a session to go to. It's just a couple hotels over. How long can it be?
Exactly.
You know, an hour and a half later, I'm rolling up all sweaty here. I tell you.
Well, I
I
think
did
if
12
you
and a
think
half
about
miles
it,
on Tuesday. 12 and a half miles in one day.
exactly. It's like that's the size of a small town. In fact, I think that's bigger than my town. Like, but I think my town is only 65,000 people. So it's trying to walk around that all day is a process, which is awesome. So thanks for
Absolutely.
everybody that went through that, and I hope you got everything out of reInvent that you went there for. And if not, we've got great sessions like this where hopefully we can continue that conversation beyond reInvent.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about the brand new feature, which is the subject of our discussion today, EKS hybrid nodes.
Yeah, you're here to talk about this, and it's an expansion on top of the suite that is EKS that we've got going today. I think most people are familiar with EKS in the cloud, and some of you may be familiar with EKS Anywhere, which is really more towards running completely air-gapped on-prem. But there's a lot of customers these days, and Dean can probably comment on this. They're trying to run hybrid. Like maybe they have data on-prem that they need access to and they need to run workloads next to, but they don't want to set up a specific cluster just for that and self-manage it. I don't know, like Dean, do you want to kind of add on? To that?
Yeah, I would say it's probably the first piece of feedback we receive from our customer and our partner base is, hey, we have EKS and we have Anywhere, but wouldn't it be great if we could have an experience that actually included both of them and not just have an air gap solution? And so, that piece of feedback has been in the mind of AWS for a period of time. And, it's fantastic we're able to launch something like that now where we can have a managed experience for on cloud and on-prem workloads.
Yeah, and like the idea here is that we work backwards from customers at AWS, and we've been hearing specifically from customers that trying to manage your own on-premise infrastructure as well as managing infrastructure in the cloud, oftentimes there's two different processes you have to put in place, and that's operational overhead that basically most people don't actually need. And what we really want to focus on, especially in this Gen AI kind of evolving and escalating evolution kind of state, like the ability to get the undifferentiated heavy lifting off your plate so that you can focus on the innovation. That's really kind of the key driver for a lot of these businesses. And so we're trying to find ways to simplify that management, consolidate some of that technical sprawl, and allow you to basically make use of the on-premise resources using the same kind of management layer and scale that you get in the cloud. And so, when we look at that, that's kind of what we were trying to drive with EKS hybrid nodes. And like I said at kind of the start of this, we have a couple different options here depending upon the use case that you're looking at. And so we have cloud connected use cases such as EKS on AWS Outposts, which has that connectivity to AWS. On the right side of this in the green, we've had things like EKS Anywhere, which is really set up to be self-managed and put in an on-premise environment in kind of an air-gapped state. The example that we typically use is things like cruise ships, where there's a ton of compute on top of these cruise ships that most customers never have to see, and they're kind of in the background, but they help the cruise ship function. Well, when that cruise ship leaves port, there's no connectivity. So I don't know if any of you have been on a cruise before, like there's no cell phone access, and maybe you're on Edge, which is like 15 years ago kind of connectivity.
Wi-Fi for $10 a minute over the satellite,
Exactly. Maybe SpaceX's new feature will help fix that with cellular satellite cell phones. But the idea is there's a middle ground here that customers need. And that's where EKS hybrid nodes really kind of comes in, where you can take advantage of what's going on in AWS from the control plane, and you can deploy workloads to node groups that you manage and bring up on your own operating system. So in this case, say Rocky Linux. So you're going to bring up those nodes, have that connectivity, and be able to schedule workloads from one location using the same process. And so you're going to get that managed Kubernetes kind of experience that's akin to running EKS.
I mean, Zane, I know you've heard our customers complaining about the hassle of running their own Kubernetes clusters. This is not a new struggle in the industry here.
No, and having to build a cluster on-prem to do, kind of what Curtis said earlier, or maybe it was Dean, that having to build a cluster on-prem for a specific use case, it just becomes more overhead, more burden, and they're looking for this. I mean, truly, this becomes an easy button. I don't have to worry about having a completely differentiated environment, differentiated thing. This is very powerful to me. I'm
consistent, standardized. Yep.
Absolutely.
Spot on.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, Zane, with that easy button kind of mentality. I don't know, for any of you that have implemented EKS anywhere, I don't want to say it's difficult, but there is a specific set of steps that you have to follow, and there are certain hardware requirements. And if that meets your use case, then they're perfect for that. But in this scenario with EKS hybrid nodes, you can bring your own infrastructure. You can bring, if you have racks sitting there that are just being unused, or you want better utilization out of them, it's a simple process of installing the control plane on, or not the control plane, but the Node ADM, the CLI on it, to connect it up to the cloud. And the most challenging part of that is honestly the networking. And so it makes it a much easier process for getting up and running and being able to amortize the value of those existing infrastructure components and get more cost savings and benefit out of them, which is fantastic. And so that's kind of where we've been headed for this, and hopefully it works well with the customers. And a lot of
speed to workload. Sorry, Kurt. I mean, speed to workload, getting things up and running, because everybody's got Kubernetes people, but at some level, there is a basic knowledge of setting up Kubernetes versus the actual deep understanding. And this kind of makes it where you don't have to have that deep of skill set. You can kind of leverage what exists. The complicated part's been done. You're just kind of connecting into it.
Well, and honestly, that's one of the things that we hear from customers all the time, like, especially when we're talking with partners, like consulting partners. I would say maybe 50 to 60% of an engagement is honestly spent on just setting up that plumbing before they've even touched the workload. And so the idea here is, if you can find a simplified way of dealing with that, you can use automation tools. You can use Terraform. You can use the things that customers are already using today to simplify that story and immediately get up and running, focusing on the workload. And that's, like, I think we forget that. Like, a lot of us are technologists that are working in the Kubernetes space, and we love the dials, we love the knobs, we want all of the third-party solutions that we're adding in, but we also really need to understand that the whole point of that is to help the business get something out to customers quickly,
that's huge,
and efficiently and safely. So, kind of on that topic, like, what are those workloads that we're seeing today and that we think are great use cases for hybrid nodes? And it spans kind of the gamut of what we're seeing today. And I don't know, Dean, if you want to cover some of these, like what we're seeing from like a sales side. I'm more of the tech junkie on this side.
Yeah. So a couple of big ones, right? So there's two ways to look at this. One is hybrid nodes brings the advantage of leveraging sweated assets that you already have on premise, things that you've already paid for that you're depreciating over time, that you want to leverage that infrastructure because it's sitting there. The other side of the coin too is, though, what if you have specialized hardware that you want to leverage with workloads, but you really can't do in cloud and on-prem at the same time? Well, that brings in that use case of things like around machine learning and some of the enterprise modernization, which is, hey, I have an application, I have a workload that's on-prem today, but I want to connect it to cloud technologies. I want to connect to some of the managed services AWS has. So we're not saying that you can't do both. What we're saying now is, you can have something on-prem and still talk to the cloud and still use our managed services. So it really brings that enterprise application landscape together, where bits and pieces and parts all can be in different places. So that's really cool. Financial services, healthcare, manufacturing. Of course, manufacturing, I think, probably brings to mind very quickly about edge devices, things that are sitting on the floor, things like that, which makes it really nice. Special purpose edge devices. Financial services and healthcare. A lot of the modeling that they do, they may not want to do it in the cloud. They may want to do it on-prem, and that could be for regulatory compliance type issues. You think about drug and research development, maybe that shouldn't be in certain parts of the cloud. Financial services, maybe there's some compliance they need to worry about. So that opens up that use case for those different types of workloads.
Yeah. And I think there's some opportunities that we can see within this. Like retail is another one that we don't have on here, but when you think about it, the whole point of this is finding ways to be able to manage what could be potentially hundreds, if not thousands of clusters from as much of a centralized place as possible. So if you're running a retail shop or a manufacturing solution where you could potentially have dozens, if not more of these, being able to manage them centrally is kind of a core thing, and being able to keep track of that, to Dean's point of like, if there's regulatory compliance or data residency compliance, you can still have the control in the cloud while maintaining the data residency and meeting those requirements without having to have something completely separate and bespoke. And so that's like, it's helping accelerate there. And then when you think about the financial services sector, they spend a lot of time hardening their operating systems. They spend a lot of time hardening like their infrastructure and being able to leverage that strength. So say they're hardening Rocky Linux and putting everything on top of that, like being able to immediately connect that to the cloud in a consistent way, taking advantage of some of the cloud benefits of security and process and governance here, and aligning that to what they're doing on-prem. It makes it a much easier process for them to be successful, especially if they're doing things like payment processing, data streaming, companies like NASDAQ, you can imagine they're running APIs on top of these types of solutions. Being able to do that in a performant way that fits into their current processes, it's great. And that's really what we want to see. And that kind of leads into, what does this actually look like? We're talking about there's a control plane in the cloud, and then there's these servers on-prem. Like, what does that actually mean? And the idea here is that we've got essentially cluster operators or automation that's happening kind of on the left side of this. And so in the cloud, you have somebody that's spinning up your infrastructure, hopefully using something like CDK or Terraform or CloudFormation to automate the infrastructure piece. But you have somebody that's doing that typically on-prem, whether they're using something like Terraform on-prem or one of the old configuration management solutions that are out there. They're basically trying to provision these things, and they can follow the same kind of process. And so what we have up in the cloud is we have an API that you're going to use that can spin up a cluster, that can do updates to that particular cluster. And then what'll happen is these clusters can spin up. You can have one that can speak to multiple regions. You can have individual clusters in individual regions. You can have a mix of them. These can even be hybrid clusters where there's some workloads that have node groups in the cloud and some node groups that are down in the on-premise environments. And you can schedule workloads based on affinities, labels, whatever. And so if you have something that your deployment team pushes out and the deployment target is an on-prem environment, it can automatically schedule that based on the resources available. And what that looks like on-prem is you need to simply spin up either VMs or bare metal and install the operating system, put the hybrid node CLI on top of it, and then from there you manage that with the specific APIs on top of that for install, init, upgrade, and uninstall. And so the fun thing that really ties this together is you've got the VPN or the direct connect. So the network connectivity is kind of the key between those two locations. And then you have governance and IAM along with that. So you can use things like systems manager and IAM roles anywhere to have consistent permissions across that. So you can still have one centralized way to control, and you get that benefit on-prem. Any questions on that? Like, does that make sense to all of you here? I realize that we're going kind of deeper in the weeds on the tech side, but.
No, absolutely. That's fantastic. And I again, just looking at this diagram, it is required that you have site-to-site VPN or direct connect.
Like I think with the next slide, we talk about the shared responsibility model. And like, when you look at the way this works, there's three components. So you've got the components in the cloud, which is really the clusters themselves, the control plane. You have the network connectivity that brings it down. In fact, I think that's on the next slide. I'll jump ahead a little bit. I lost it. Oh well. Womp womp. So basically the idea here is you've got what's up in the cloud. You've got the network connection, which can be direct connect or VPN down to the on-premise environments. And then you have the on-premise environment. And as long as you have those three things set up, you're good to go. And you can automate the configuration of basically each of those components. So using something like CDK, you can spin up the VPCs in AWS. You can spin up the clusters. You can even spin up and provision the VPN connections if you're using a VPN. I think there's a little bit more to it with the direct connect side, but you can still automate the good portion of that. And then on-prem, you can use something like Terraform to provision the individual nodes themselves and install the certificates and the CLI to make that connection. And in a fully automated sense, that makes a lot of sense. And in that structure, there's certain things that we will do for you, and there's certain things that we want the customers to understand that they need to be responsible for. So at the top of this diagram that you're seeing here, it's the AWS managed resources. This is all the stuff that's up in the cloud, like EKS itself, the VPN connections, guard duty, the security and observability pieces, the cluster and the control plane. All of that is essentially the managed services that you're going to turn on with the click of a button and maybe provide some light configuration, but we're going to handle the management, upkeep, and security of those. As you go down that stack into the on-premise environment, this is where you're going to have the actual node groups. So the physical infrastructure, the virtualization, the on-premise networking, things like that, the operating system, that's really where the customer is going to have to manage that. And where we come in kind of in a hybrid scenario or as a Venn diagram overlap is really the EKS hybrid nodes, CLI, and the node group management on top of that. So things like managing the kube proxy, core DNS, any of the Kubernetes add-ons that are a part of EKS, we're going to offer support for that. And then the same with Node ADM itself, like how we manage the on-premise nodes so they can have that connectivity to the cloud. We'll support that as well. So you have fully managed up in AWS that you can have a support contract to get support there. You have on-premise where you're going to manage your own infrastructure, and maybe you have somebody that helps you with support for that. And then at the operating system to application layer, there's a combination of support. And I imagine CIQ offers support for all the Rocky Linux users out there, that if you're using that as your base, you can have like a fully supported implementation across the stack, whether through AWS or through CIQ.
Absolutely, we do.
Okay.
The shared responsibility model's well known around here for sure, and we're ready to help any customers who are running Rocky Linux anywhere you can boot up a Rocky Linux machine.
And honestly, that's the value that I hope more customers take advantage of. Like we said earlier, it's this ability to go from idea to implementation as quickly as possible. Like some people, yes, you need to manage things yourself, but if you have partners like CIQ and like AWS to help you with that process, you take advantage of it wherever possible. I realize not everybody can afford, support contracts, but we all work our best to make those affordable and meaningful. And then we have partners that help along the way. And this was the diagram I was actually looking for. So the 4 components that you need to have are the network connectivity, the on-premise infrastructure, the operating system itself. And I apologize, Rocky Linux isn't on this slide, but we're working to get it on this slide. Like it belongs here as far as I'm concerned. And so we want to make sure that that's on this slide as well. So my apologies there. And then you have the credential providers, which is the security side of it. So you've got systems manager and IAM roles anywhere, which are consistency with the cloud. So those are the 4 components. Any questions on this? Anything we need to add? I think this is the boring slide.
Are there any latency requirements from the on-prem connection back to AWS?
I mean, it's not like video game latency where you need the lowest ping to be successful. I think the latency requirement is more for the specific workloads. And it's going to vary based on the workload itself. As long as it can report in at specific occasions, like the reality is if that connectivity drops, it just simply means that the cluster state is going to remain the same unless something happens on those node groups. Like if you have that disconnected and something goes down, it's not going to restart. And so it's you just want to make sure that like that meets your risk appetite for that workload. And so that's why if you have a scenario, honestly, that is has a looser connection or a connection that's going to drop with frequency, that's where I would look more towards something like an air gap solution, something like EKS Anywhere, and consider that so that you can have that on-premise control plane. But if you don't have that requirement, or you have somewhat consistent connectivity, even if it's a slower connection, like just being able to connect to that control plane to schedule nodes would be good. I mean, the lower it is, the better. But I'm like, literally, I've got a server sitting right here running a number of these instances. And I've got on my home connection, which I hope a business connection is faster than that. I've got a home connection here and it's 70 milliseconds. And it's pumping out workloads just fine. And this has a GPU and I'm scheduling, GPU related tasks on it. So it seems to be doing just fine.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's a fun idea here. And this is kind of the fun diagram of how it all works. And basically, there's 3 focus areas. So when you set up the cluster, there's things that you have to kind of know in advance. And that's going to be, everything is the crux of this all is networking. the tripping point and the challenge that everybody runs into is the networking piece. And you need to know these things up in advance, because when you create the cluster, you're going to have to know the remote node network CIDR ranges and the remote pod network CIDR ranges. And the pod network CIDR range really only needs to be known if you're going to be running things that have webhooks, because the way that webhooks work in this scenario is the control plane needs to be able to know the IP address for those, so that it can actually, like, since they're running in the cluster itself, they're pods, it's going to have to be able to route down, and it goes directly to the actual IP of the pod network. So generally we want you to expose that with like BGP, but at the end of the day, you have to know those up front so that you can feed that into the cluster configuration, so that when it provisions that cluster, it knows how to communicate those workloads down and connect to them. And so if you're going to have multiple node groups or multiple networks, these are the kind of things that you have to have that kind of theory for, or understanding of upfront, so that you can get it right. It's not something today, it is a feature request for the future, but it's something today that you can change on the fly. It's a destructive change. And so I just want you to be clear on that. Within that, you also have the VPC routing. So you're going to provision the VPC, and then you're going to set up specific routes through your direct connector, through your VPN, using those CIDR ranges. And so you need to have that set up. And so whether you have 1, 5, however many subnets you want, you just need to make sure that routing is set up so that it's actually transporting those communications through the right network channels. And then you're going to configure on your on-premise environment that network routing. So make sure that it's coming through, and then the gateway and your router on premises understand how to route that to the specific cluster, and then also down to the specific node groups in there. And then once you are in that, it's like, once you're in the node group, it's just standard Kubernetes. Like, you can use the CNIs that you typically want to use. You just can't use the VPC CNI, because on premise that's an AWS perspective, specific thing. But you can use things like Cilium or Calico on premise. You can set up your ingress controllers the same way you normally would. The Metal LB is supported, Node or Nginx is supported, and then basically it's just standard Kubernetes from there. The thing that you just have to be aware of is when you're deploying workloads, how are you getting storage connected to it? How is the operating system being secured and separating between the workloads that are on it, and making sure that you've got all that kind of stuff in place for the on-premise environment? Like, that's basically all there is to it. It's essentially a networking component in provisioning tool on the on-prem, which simplifies it, honestly.
Absolutely, it does massively.
Yeah. And that's the hope. And then for those of you that want to see what this looks like within the console, it's not just a CLI implementation. When you go to create your cluster, there's going to be an option for you to specify a remote network. And it's just going to ask you for this. So your node CIDR and your pod CIDR. And that's basically all it comes down to. On premises, the way you're going to provision this, if anybody was familiar with EKS Anywhere, we have a whole solution that goes through and provisions the bare metal. It speaks to IPMI, and will basically provision, turn on the bare metal, install everything, configure the control plane, configure the node groups. This is a much more simplified scenario. Like, you're going to have the node ADM CLI, which goes through and sets up the cluster software on it, installs Kubernetes. It will provision all you can set up the certificates to allow for that connection. It's going to register those nodes and basically set everything up that needs to be running on top of it. And then basically that's it. And so from there, you're just in the typical lifecycle management of those nodes.
You make it sound so simple, Kurt.
Well, I don't want to, like, I run the risk of making it sound overly simple. Like, it's as simple as we can make it right now. We are open to feedback. We are looking for ways to improve that process, especially in the automation phase of things. If you can, we want to make it as simple and seamless as possible for customers. But at the end of the day, it's still software that you have to install. You're still provisioning the hardware, and you as the customer need to be, have a process for that. And there's ways to automate that wherever possible. So yeah.
So and if you have, sorry, JW, if you have an existing EKS cluster, can you turn it into a hybrid cluster, or would it be building a new one? I know that affects the networking in the back end a little bit. So
yeah, so long term, we want to be able to get to that. So if you have something, you can configure it. But based on the networking implementation today at launch, it's something that it's a destructive change. Like, you're going to have to spin up a new cluster. Fortunately, this is the same process everybody runs today. Like, you want to spin up a new version, you can do an in-place upgrade, but a lot of customers will just spin up another cluster, make sure everything's working, and then redeploy the workworkloads. You just update your CI/CD processes and get it over. It's kind of the same model there. It's just you've got that additional step of setting up the network connectivity. But honestly, once that's set up, it's the same process. It's all a matter of routes. The VPC and the actual VPN connection or direct connect connection can stay the same. It's just where you're deploying those clusters. And so it's just a matter of making sure the networking can connect those routes.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
The documentation on this is actually pretty clear too. We were, Kurt, you and I were involved in the pre-release testing for this feature, and the networking was the hardest part by far, but that's pretty standard plumbing for anything you're doing in this genre.
I think that's kind of funny too, because like everybody understood the Kubernetes part. And I think most customers really understand that Kubernetes and the provisioning process. We've been doing this for years, but I think a lot of people don't actually venture into the networking side. And I don't know, from my own history, I used to work at a mapping software company, and the networking team, they were seen as gods. They were off like another room, and like you made requests of them and you begged and pleaded to get ports open. And it's like just that whole structure was essentially seen as magic to
black magic.
The consumer. Yeah, it's
Absolutely.
black magic.
It is.
And you can kind of see that throughout the launch. Like as everybody's trying to get through this, the networking was the stumbling point. And honestly, the networking isn't that hard. And so that I see as a good sign. If that's where we're stumbling, is just that connectivity, and the rest of it is pretty straightforward, that's a win. Like I think that's the important piece. So for those of you listening, don't let that seem like it's a barrier. This is actually a really easy process. And we're working to find ways to give you examples on how to actually automate the provisioning of those in context, so that we're offering, say, blueprints that can actually provision and spin these things up so that you don't have to. They'll give you an output that's your connection keys. They'll give you an output that's the VPN security implementation, and the certs and that implementation you need to take to your network team to build that and connect it. Like we're trying to find ways to simplify that, and we're going to continue to evolve this over the next year to make it even easier for customers to get set up. So,
and the good news is you go through the pain once. And once you get through that small bit of pain of getting connected, then you have that unified run operations where everything's put together on a single console. So everything actually looks the same.
Yeah. And it looking the same is kind of the key. What's on the slide here right now is the way these nodes are going to show up in the console in AWS is the exact same way that the nodes show up today for the nodes in AWS. You're just going to get an additional item down here under compute. I think you can see my mouse. That just denotes whether that node is AWS or if it's hybrid. And then you're also going to get visibility into the actual metrics on those nodes themselves. And so that's the beauty of it actually running as a traditional node in your clusters. You get the same visibility as you would with anything, any other cluster. So it's really that simplification. And then you're going to have the same access to things like EKS add-ons that you would. Now, if it's an EKS add-on that's specific to just AWS and what's in the cloud, maybe that's not going to work for you. Like the VPC CNI, that's just it's not applicable in that scenario. But everything else should work. And we had, I think, 19 launch partners, including CIQ, at launch for this. That includes various ISV solutions, as well as consulting solutions that can help. And so we're going to continue to grow that. But at the end of the day, this is just standard Kubernetes. So if you're using it today, chances are it's going to work just like it normally does. And then some of the features that we're looking at launch, it's available essentially in all AWS commercial regions. It's specifically to your point, Zane, it's for new clusters today. It is a feature request. We are going to try and get that in so that we can modify existing clusters, but that's not available today. It uses the same versions of Kubernetes that we support in the cloud. So the latest standard version, as well as the extended Kubernetes versions. And we typically support 2 to 3 versions back. I'm going to get shot for that one because I can't remember whether it was just 2 or 3, and I should know that. So I'm sure I'm going to get a Slack message later. It's 2.
Try to stay current. That's the real answer. Just try to stay current.
Just try to stay current.
Please upgrade.
Both of these, like the Node ADM and the CLI and AWS, offer support for upgrades. So make sure you're running the latest. And if you're not, set up a process with your ops teams to make sure that that's something that happens. As these are coming out, you can set up parallel. Like I say this, my wife would yell at me, like there are costs with setting up secondary clusters and A/B environments. But if you are using this with a purpose and you make sure that testing is set up, you can save on costs there. But the idea is at regular intervals, be testing your software against the latest versions and making use of your CI/CD pipelines to get those tested and validated and automated so that you can release them as quickly as possible.
Especially a conversation we have around here far too often, Curtis. We run across customers who are running operating systems that are literally 20 years old. So,
dude, I came from
not a common problem.
The reason I'm in modernization is I came from a company where we were running Cold Fusion 7 for 400 applications during a time when Cold Fusion 12 was out. And just saying we were running Cold Fusion just makes me like, it's like there's some stigma there, but it's that reality of like, it's real. People get locked into these legacy applications. And that's where companies like you and we're really here to help people get onto these latest versions, stay secure, like get the right operating systems in place as a foundation to build their applications on top of. And like by partnering with you in this, like we can help get those workloads moved over. And so if you as a customer have these legacy workloads on-prem, work with CIQ, work with AWS. Let's get these types of things provisioned in Kubernetes. Let's containerize them and like hopefully breathe new life into them. So you're not just like, it's not Pandora's box where you occasionally open it and go like, oh my God, it's okay, we got to close the box. It's
Absolutely.
These workloads can actually be modernized and keep your business going. And getting back to this, it's the same console and CLIs that you're used to today. And so everything should work the same as you would expect. Mixed mode, we do support mixed mode clusters. I think this is an interesting one for a lot of customers. You can have node groups in AWS as well as on-prem and multiple on-prem environments, under one cluster. And that, no two workloads are the same. And oftentimes the workloads that we do have are complex, like especially if you're looking at Gen AI workloads. Some things are going to be serving functions. Some of these things are going to be batch process. Some of these are going to be streaming functions and capabilities, and others are going to be long-term inferencing. You can find the right node group and provision the right infrastructure in Silicon to meet the needs of that application, but still have it all within the same cluster in context to each other so you can minimize the networking hops and increase that performance those workloads may need. And so we offer that same kind of flexibility. And this is something that's really interesting and I think is a key differentiator for this solution, because typically you have to manage these things separately. And maybe you've got an API that's connecting across these clusters, but they're completely independent. Here you can have them all be a part of the same workload, and you can take advantage of the same policies and permissions internally to keep the workloads kind of segregated. You can have the same namespacing across these, and you can get that proximity. So it's kind of an important thing to keep in mind.
You can truly build a multi-tier application stack across on-prem and on cloud. It's pretty cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's something that more customers should probably take advantage of or consider. And then on-prem, like we continue to have the same thing. So you can use Core DNS as an add-on for auto scaling, and the kubectl add-on as well. And so in AWS, you can take advantage of EKS auto mode potentially, and then on-premise you can have auto scaling that's handling the scaling of your on-premise environment. Again, I have said this a couple times, but I really want to hit this one home. You can take advantage of the same IAM policies and roles on-prem as you do in AWS using the pod identity and IAM roles or IAM roles anywhere. I always mix them up. I want to call it URSA. Like URSA's here. You get URSA within the cluster, and then you get IAM roles for the cluster itself, which is nice. And then the same kind of observability is there. Like most customers these days are using Prometheus and Grafana. We've got OTel that's on top of that, connecting it all together. You could take advantage of running these in the cluster. Or you can take advantage of managed services like managed Prometheus and Grafana in AWS if you want. And then the same observability tooling like CloudWatch is there as well. So you can pump that out through OTel into CloudWatch, and then GuardDuty to manage the auditing and governance of the cluster. Like some of this is the boring plumbing, but these are important features. I'm sure there's a security admin or an operations person that's like, that's there and it works. So for you, I applaud you and I laud you. Thank you for being you. And then for the rest of us that are looking at just the workload, there's everything you need in here to make you successful. So there's a little bit of it for everybody on this. And honestly, that's all I had for the presentation. There really isn't too much more to it. So we got the thank you slide. And we do have an email address. So if any of the customers here have questions or need help or support on this, you can email AWS EKS Hybrid with questions. Feature requests are great through here. If you have a support contract, I recommend not using this for support. Contact your support representatives, your TAM, and go through them for support. This is more of feature requests and communications to the go-to-market teams. So yeah. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen.
Direct to your inbox there, Kurt.
Direct, yeah. It's just all an alias to Siri.
And for anybody who's looking to implement this themselves, as I mentioned earlier, there's fantastic service documentation available from AWS about this as well. CIQ, we've also prepared a full-on technical blog walking through the process of installing this, from inception through validation of the cluster to know that it's working, and showing a quick little app, a little game that we threw on as a validation test. That's going to be up on the CIQ website. So if you want to see exactly how the sausage is made in a specific scenario, you can go take a look at that as well.
Yeah, and I'm planning on using some of that internally at AWS to share with the SAs here that can take them out to customers as well. I think that's the key differentiator here. Like, there is the documentation, which walks you through everything. Like, you get full details of all the considerations that you should be making with setting this up. What I love about your blog post, and what I think customers are going to get the most value of when it launches, is it's very prescriptive. Like, instead of the theory, it's the actual practical application. Because a lot of times when people are setting something up for the first time, they just want to see it. Like, what does it actually look like? And then if they have specific requirements, the docs are there to support that. So definitely combine the two. Take a look at the team's blog when it comes out, because it does tell you, okay, do this now. Like, here's the consideration. Now do this. So it'll get you up and running very quickly. And then as you want to go beyond that, definitely reach out to the rest of us to helping you in that journey.
Yeah, taking it one step further, we will be Ansibilizing a lot of this because we have our Ansible products. So we want to make it as easy as possible.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's something that I think we can even continue to support with you to try and get that out to customers. We've got the options of CDK and Terraform in the cloud, but if customers today are using Ansible with CIQ, let's do it. Let's get that set up to make it just a turnkey solution for customers. You can get up and running, secure the operating system, make sure everything's performant and tuned the way you need for your governance and requirements.
Perfect. We'll certainly be hitting you up about that one here in 2025, Kurt.
Absolutely, and I look forward to it. And I don't know, Dean, is there anything else that I missed or you think we should add?
I think you covered it pretty well.
Thank you.
No, I think I think we're good.
Yeah, I love these more interactive conversations versus than just reading a slide deck. Like, it's much more valuable.
Agreed. Thank you for doing that. Appreciate it.
Anytime.
Thanks for letting us interact and ask questions. It's been beneficial for me.
So are you guys going to be sticking around as we talk about Rocky and Werewolf, or are you heading out?
I have time to stick around. I'm kind of interested in hearing more about this, to be honest. So I don't know if I need to stay on camera or what.
Do. Yeah,
stick around.
Yeah, stick around.
Yeah. Now you get to ask questions.
Sounds good.
Exactly. So I think this is actually JW's time to shine right now, talking about Rocky Linux on AWS Marketplace.
You can run Rocky Linux all over the place, including in AWS. We've got marketplace listings for you ready to go. These are, of course, our standard offerings. It's our latest version of Rocky 8, latest version of Rocky 9, which has just come out as 9.5. So we're talking about keeping your environments current, folks. It is time to upgrade. You'll find those in the AWS Marketplace. We've got them for x86 right now. ARM will be coming very shortly. Our engineers are turning the crank in the back end to put that all together. And it will be very shortly behind that. We also have some LTS images there. If you happen to be running a little bit older of a version because you've got some apps that maybe are bound by very specific compliance requirements, or you're running an ISV application that is certified only on one specific older version. Rose, how often do we see that?
A lot.
David.
We can help you with the ongoing security and compliance for those. for the previous handful of minor versions of 8 and 9. Obviously, you don't necessarily get the latest and greatest performance and security features if you're running a little bit back there, but that's the reality of the world sometimes. And so we offer that for you as well. And a quick plug for another AWS service. If you are running virtual desktops through Amazon Workspaces or AppStream 2.0, you can also find Rocky Linux over there. And it's a drop-in replacement, for your RHEL environments. You fire it up right from the console and you go. So you can run Rocky across your entire fleet, your whole infrastructure, all the way from the edge, all the way up through the cloud and into some managed virtual desktop services for you.
You're really making it easy for customers to adopt, aren't you?
It's our goal.
Let's talk about ARM support, as you just mentioned. When's that going to come out? Because we love ARM support with Graviton.
Yeah, absolutely, and we love it too. We're actually just refreshing those images, as we speak. Really, I would expect that if it's not up by the time you're seeing this webinar, when the bits flow through the pipe and get uploaded there, it wouldn't be more than a few weeks beyond that. This is a very, very fast follow thing. We just do them one at a time. As we have the bandwidth on our solutions delivery team there.
Fantastic. We have a pretty large embedded base of Graviton customers, and we love to hear that you're supporting Graviton.
Yeah, it's really exciting, especially going through the marketplace, like simplifying that procurement process for a lot of customers, just being able to make it more of a turnkey solution, handle billing and stuff. That's fantastic. So thanks for going through that. I really do appreciate it.
It's our pleasure.
Absolutely.
And we're happy to, if you've got customers who need a site license or anything of that nature, do some enterprise support. It's not just metered listings off the rack. We're happy to talk to you about a private offer if you've got something that's not covered by the version you just grab and walk to the checkout with there. So come and talk to us. We got Zane, we got Rose, we got all our CIQ team. We're here for you.
That's right.
Yeah.
And thanks to the team that's working on ARM. I know Skip's a big fan. I know Skip puts a lot of time into it. So I know there's a team of people, but Skip, appreciate your work on ARM.
Yeah, thanks, Skip.
Shout out to Skip.
Absolutely.
Well, it's an important thing, especially as we have more and more customers looking for Gen AI workloads. They're trying to find ways to get that performance as well as the cost savings, because some of these workloads are very expensive. And so being able to make use of ARM processors wherever possible, we should all be hitting up AMD and some of the Intel, see if we can get them to accelerate development of more ARM processors for on-premise environments too.
Sure.
Cool. So I know, sorry. Because there's so many other directions you can go in with cloud and with Rocky Linux. And I was like, I don't know. Should we refocus back into the next thing? I think so. I think probably we will let Rocky just lay right there, as beautiful as it is. So there actually is another open source project that we help maintain and support and do training with, that is really taking a front seat in a lot of our conversations and places that we are going. I mean, all of our stuff is very exciting, but Werewolf is making a comeback, man.
It's got a bright future.
Werewolf.
Gonna keep saying it. I keep saying it.
Good marketing, man. Good. I like it. I like it a lot. So,
You're welcome.
yes, we just want to make a little bit of a plug for Werewolf right now, and using Werewolf to manage your GPU clusters. We're actually having a webinar with that exact title on January 11th at 11 a.m. You actually have to register for this one. So it isn't one that we're just going to be live. We kind of want it to be a little bit more personalized, a little bit more hands-on, not live in there, but not live to the, you know what I mean? Like live on YouTube.
You got to register and get the link.
Got to register. Thank you.
And it has to be a full moon too, right?
Yeah.
That's it.
Is it? That would be so
Yeah.
cool.
That would be
How
amazing
cool
if
would
it
that
worked.
be?
Somebody should check the calendar, double check.
Now I'm
Okay.
thinking.
Oh, that would be amazing. Yes. So January 9th. And we're going to put the registration link right in the comments right there for you. So it'll be super easy. And I guess, Jess, is there any questions? Any other questions we got?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. I think it's an important thing that we should, like most customers should be considering. Like AWS, we don't offer a multi-cluster management solution. And so having a solution like Werewolf that can handle cluster provisioning for customers and simplifying that process, that's something that's actually really important and most customers should be evaluating. Trying to manage these things yourself doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And so it's really exciting to see products like this coming out. Now, I have a question for you because I'm just the peanut gallery here now. Is there a reason for the name Werewolf? Like, is there a meaning behind that?
Yes. You know it, Zane?
I'm blanking for some reason. I've heard this story from Greg probably 20 times for some reason.
The where is actually somewhere, right? And wolf is from Beowulf model, like the Beowulf cluster.
Beowulf clusters,
model.
yeah.
That's totally cool.
The OG of clusters back in the day there.
Trivia night now. I'm gonna stump everybody next Friday.
Yeah, that's right.
If we did trivia night together, I think we would win. I think we would all win. Here.
Especially with that question.
So Curtis, actually that brings up a question for you. Like, how familiar are you with Werewolf?
I am unfortunately not very familiar. So like just understanding of just like at the very high level what it is and what it does, yes. But deep in the weeds of the power and the value it's providing for customers, I'm actually kind of green to. So like, are you willing to dive in a little bit on what that is? And do we have time for that? Or is
Sure.
Yeah.
We can do that. Yeah. So I mean, it's really an HPC tool. It started off as a very easy way to deploy a large amount of nodes, compute nodes. As of version 4, it's actually a stateless provisioner. So all of the actual compute nodes, it provisions stateless. So it makes it a very easy, very fast way to provision out a lot of nodes. And the way that it was designed, the way that it's built now, it's very easy. It's a command line tool that you can just start deploying out. The images are an OCI compliant container image. It's not what it actually, it's not pushing a container to a machine. It actually puts a version of Linux running in memory, but it's very easy to define what those look like because it's just an OCI compliant container definition. So it makes it really easy to define what you want your compute nodes to look like. It's very easy to change them, switch them out, add things to them with overlays. So it's a really powerful tool.
That's fantastic. Like, I'm going to dive into that this weekend because I want to learn a little bit more about that. That's
very
really
cool. Very cool.
Awesome. Okay, guys. Well, we actually could probably just keep on talking for a long time because there's so many different aspects and so many exciting things in the tech world and at AWS, the amazing things that you guys are bringing to the forefront and for the community and for your customers. It's really exciting. We are so pleased to be one of your partners, one of your many, but one of your partners at AWS. So yes, thank you for all the work that we're doing together. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we really do appreciate the partnership, and I'll speak for Dean, and he may want to comment, but we're definitely looking forward to continuing the partnership into 2025, and I'm looking forward to seeing more ways that we can find integrations and drive more value to your customers.
Yeah,
exactly.
Likewise, Kurt and Dean.
Absolutely.
Yep,
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Okay, well, happy holidays, you guys, and happy New Year, and thank you so much for being here. We'll see you in 2025.
Yeah,
Bye.
same to all of you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.